weak response.
Hello.
Today we have the pleasure of having our Die Point neighbor and friend, John Eddy, and his associate, Rich Thomas, portraying General Ormsby Mitchell and General Rufus Saxon, both Union generals during the Civil War. John and Rich are volunteers at the Heritage Library Foundation. They conduct tours and reenactments at the Zion Chapel of Ease Cemetery and at Fort Mitchell, both on Hilton Head Island. Tonight, their program will depict how these two generals came up with the plan for the development of the town of Mitchellville at the north end of Hilton Head Island. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy this fascinating program from John Eddy and Rich Thomas.
Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm John Eddy, and I will be portraying Ormsby Mitchell.
And I'm Rich Thomas, and I'll be portraying Rufus Saxton. So I'll go ahead and start off. First of all, thank you all for coming out, supporting us, supporting the mission of the Heritage Library. The Heritage Library is an all-volunteer organization. We have one paid employee, and that is our executive director. We have a threefold mission. One of those is history research, another is family genealogy research, and the third is historic site preservation. And Fort Mitchell and the Zion Chapel of East Cemetery are those two sites on Hilton Head that we are the stewards of preservation for. We do provide tours of both those properties, and the tours at the Zion Chapel are on Tuesdays starting at 10:30, and the tours at Fort Mitchell are on Thursdays starting at 10:30. We do not perform tours when there is a heat advisory. Because as you can tell, some of us would probably pass out. Let me set the stage a little bit for this. What you will be witnessing is a conversation between the two generals about 10 days after General Mitchell arrives on Hilton Head. General Saxton had been down earlier, had come to Beaufort as the military governor of the Department of the South, responsible for the care and skilling up of the freedmen for living lives in freedom. And don't forget, this is all before the Emancipation Proclamation. So what's going to happen on Hilton Head is leading edge, and General Mitchell will be right at the point of that leading edge development, which is creating a fully independent, self-governing town of former slaves on Hilton Head called Mitchellville. So, General Mitchell?
General Saxton.
You know, I'm kind of tired of the general thing. It's all the time.
That's
General
what we
this.
hear, General this, General that.
I mean, I don't know why people don't think people have first names.
Well,
I mean, is it all right if I call you Ormsby?
only if I can call you Rufus.
You certainly may.
Yeah, and I appreciate you coming over on the steamer from Beaufort today so that we can talk. And we're here at my residence on Fish Hall Creek.
A nice young man, one of your aides, and I think it was a son of yours, actually directed me to find you here.
Yeah, I have two of my sons, and both of them are aide-de-camp here on the island for us.
That sounds like a good arrangement.
Well,
I could bring my brother, but I had to give him a real job.
oh yeah, well, my boys do really well. But I thought what we would do is sit out here in the nice breeze, overlook Port Royal Sound, and I happened to bring some bourbon that I picked up when I was going through Kentucky, and I happened to pour some for you, and I didn't know whether you partaked or not, but I'm going to partake.
That's a wonderful gesture. I
Yeah.
certainly will take you up on that. I wouldn't want to offend you.
Yeah.
Of course, I wouldn't care about having it.
So why don't we take a seat and we'll talk a little bit about, but you know, it's, what is this? We'll put it this way.
Back at the chair with the sword.
Yeah. There we go. All right. Nice location here.
Oh,
this is great. The Port Royal Sound here. Now you've been here a while.
Yes.
And
Since about May of this year.
and I just came down, a week ago from DC after spending time in Nashville and a couple other places out there, and I heard a little bit about the Battle of Port Royal and how we came to be here, but Do you know any more about that and how that happened?
Well, I can tell you some about it. I was not here at the time, of course, but it was still very fresh in people's minds after I got here, especially in the minds of the former slaves. This was a signal event for them in this journey, a long journey that they will undertake in the future to live lives of freedom. But the battle transpires as a result of a planning board that Abraham Lincoln convenes at about May 15th of 1862, because when the shots rang out at Fort Sumter in April, the ground forces strategy for the war is pretty clear. What they intend to do is they go into Southern territory, they occupy the capital, and from the capital they'll command and control that area. But the naval strategy wasn't as well mapped out at all. There was a vague idea that they would try to surround the Confederacy by water, control the Mississippi River, the Gulf Coast, and the Atlantic coast. But how to do that was still very much a question. So the planning board convened, they met for about 10 days, came out with a recommendation to President Lincoln and the cabinet that 4 blockading squadrons be formed to patrol the coast of the United States from Cape Fear, North Carolina to Galveston Island, Texas. And those 4 squadrons would each have their own fleets of ships, and they would also each have to have their own base of operations, where they could not only stage for any land-based operations, but also could refuel their ships. And he put in charge of the planning board a man named Samuel DuPont, just happened to be the favorite nephew of the guy that started the gunpowder factory in Delaware. And DuPont was well connected. He was also very bright, and DuPont's assignment coming out of the planning meeting was the South Atlantic Blockading Squadron. Well, they had to form an idea of where the base of operations would be. Make a very long story short, there were 3 alternatives. Port Royal Sound was selected because, as many of you probably know, it's the 2nd largest and 2nd deepest harbor, natural harbor on the East Coast. New York Harbor being the deepest and Chesapeake Bay being the largest. And that was a strategic reason for the choice, but there was a symbolic reason too, a psychological objective that Abraham Lincoln himself had forwarded to the selection of the location. And in the minds of the people of the North, Beaufort County and the Port Royal Sound area was thought of as the heartland of secession and the epicenter of slavery.
I heard that's where they started it, right over there in Beaufort.
They started the articles in Beaufort,
yeah.
wrote them in Bluffton and Beaufort, and took them to the South Carolina legislature, and they voted to secede. The other reason was that we're right in between the slave markets of Savannah and Charleston. And because of that, the identification with slavery was very powerful. So Lincoln wanted to deal a very powerful psychological blow to the Confederacy by establishing a base of operations right in their heartland. So the Port Royal Sound was selected. The plan called, unfortunately, for about 250 vessels to accomplish the mission in the 4 squadrons. And the Navy at the beginning of the war had only 37 ships. So the dilemma was, how do we ramp up production? So Congress authorized the seizure of any steam-powered vessels to be refitted as gunships or ships of war. The shipyards were ordered to ramp up production 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So things got pretty much underway, and by about the middle of August, DuPont had amassed a fleet of 77 ships, and they were in Newport News Harbor. It was the largest fleet ever assembled to that time in the United States, in the history of the United States. The plan was to launch an amphibious invasion. And the amphibious invasion would entail about 13,000 soldiers, the 75 ships, that would be the transports and the gunships. And that was intended to begin as soon as the ships arrived at Port Royal Sound. Well, on the way down, they encountered a hurricane. Funny thing of all things, at Cape Hatteras. And that completely scattered the fleet, sunk a couple of ships, and caused many of the valuable supplies to be lost overboard, including 300 of the 500 landing craft that they took for the amphibious invasion, which, had it come off as planned, would have been the largest amphibious invasion in American history until D-Day in World War II. Well, because of the storm, the ships kind of came in piecemeal. They staggered in over a couple of days. On the 5th, General Thomas West Sherman, no relation to William Tecumseh that we know, came into DuPont and told him that they had lost 300 of the landing craft and couldn't pull off their part of the invasion. So it would have to be a naval-only battle. DuPont called a council of war of all his captains. They discussed the situation. He sent in a flotilla of 5 ships to test the range and accuracy of the gunners at Fort Beauregard over on Bay Point and at Fort Walker here on Hilton Head. And after about 20 minutes, they came hightailing it back saying, they're very accurate, they have plenty of range. So now the plan for the battle had to be developed based on that intelligence. And one of the captains had participated in a reconnaissance in force that had gotten into an engagement with 2 forts at Hatteras Inlet, North Carolina. And in that engagement, they evolved kind of organically a plan that would entail sailing in an elliptical pattern and bombarding the forts on one side as they entered the channel and bombarding the forts on the other side as they exited the channel. So that was pretty much taken up almost immediately by DuPont as a good plan. He scheduled the invasion for the following morning, which was November 6th. And on November 6th, unfortunately, it was extremely stormy, terrible conditions for an invasion. I mean, you have to have good conditions for an invasion. Not many invasions have happened in good conditions. It certainly D-Day did not either. Anyway, the invasion took place over a period of about 5 or 6 hours. On the first pass of the warships, at the end of the first salvo, about 1/3 of the Confederate guns on both sides were knocked out. Fort Beauregard had a special problem because Fort Beauregard's construction began in May and they were not finished. Neither was Fort Walker and Hilton Head by the time that the invasion took place. So the munitions that they had on hand for the cannons at Fort Beauregard were the wrong caliber. So a number of the guns jammed. They were useless from that point on. Well, battle goes on for about 3 hours, and by 12 o'clock in the afternoon, there is no fire coming from either fort. So DuPont decides he'll send in a small boat with about 20 men under the command of Captain Davis, one of his favorite captains, under a white flag of truce to negotiate terms of surrender with the Confederates. That's all well and good, but when they land, they walk up the beach to the fort. They don't see any soldiers anywhere. They go into the fort, and there's not a Confederate to be found. They had evacuated about 12 o'clock that day. And they'll go in, and they'll take the fort over. They want to raise Old Glory as quickly as they can, but they have to repair the flagpole before it takes place. It had been obliterated during the battle. So by 2:30 in the afternoon, the Stars and Stripes are flying, and the Union Army has occupied Hilton Head Island. Over the next couple of days, they'll occupy the rest of Port Royal. But when the gunfire ceases, all of the slaves on the neighboring plantations started coming to Hilton Head. I mean, in their oral tradition, they call it the big gun shoot. And following the big gun shoot, they knew that the Lincoln soldiers were here to liberate them. So they started coming in droves for protection and refuge near the forts and near the other camps that were established in the Port Royal area over the next 3 days. And that created a problem situation. And one of the reasons, probably, General Mitchell, that you've come down and that I was sent here, was how to deal with this humanitarian crisis. How to equip all of these people with the necessities for living and also to live their own lives in freedom at a later time.
So that's how we got here.
That's how
the Union Army got into the heart of the South.
Yeah, and you talk to people today, and most people can't really believe that there was a Union base right in the heart of the South for 5 years.
And speaking of President Lincoln, I think we need to have a toast.
Let's have a toast.
A little fervent to President Lincoln, for his health. Excuse us while we drink.
To his health. So, General Mitchell, you're the new fellow on the block.
I thought you were going to call me Ormsby.
Well, I decided to be formal because I'd like to have a little bit of a formal rundown on you, if you wouldn't mind. I am senior in the rank.
Pulling rank again. That's it. Well,
I'm a rank guy.
you know, I had a humble upbringing. I was born in Union County, Kentucky. Lived there until I was 7 years old, and then my daddy died, and Mama took us and myself and the kids, and we moved to Lebanon, Ohio. And we were there, lived in Lebanon, Ohio, until I was about 14, and I did real well in school, good at mathematics, good at a lot of stuff. And at that time, I became real enamored with the stars and the constellations and the planets. And at 14, Mama said, well, what are you going to do with yourself, Ormsby? You're a smart little boy, but you know, you got to plan. Are you going to go to work? What's going to happen? And I said, I don't know. What do you think? And she happened to be friends with this judge at this time, and by the name of Lucas, and he was a very prominent man in Ohio at that time. And you know what he did for me? He got me an appointment at 14 to the West Point Academy. And the next year, I went to the West Point Academy, and I had to walk there because we didn't have the money for me to take a train or anything.
Your name?
383 miles on these feet. I mean, that's a long way.
It sounds like an infantryman to me.
I know. And we got there, and the first day of assembly, there's 45 of us in my class. You'll never guess who was in my class with me.
Well, it's not fair because I came after you and I recognize that class.
That's right. Robert E. Lee.
The stars
We're in the same class together. And the class before me, Jefferson Davis. And now Jefferson Davis, you talk about a drinker. That man could drink. He got court-martialed twice for drinking off base.
He also lived on in his reputation.
That's right. And he and I got along really well because he wasn't really good in math. And for 3 years, I tutored him in mathematics so he could finish up his degree. And then after I graduated, they kept me on as a professor of mathematics for a number of years, for 4 years. And then at that time, I happened to met this little lady by Miss Louisa. Oh, she was a beauty. She was a widow, had a young son, and her family hated me. What are you going to do with a military man, they used to say. He has no future. And I said, well, I understand, Miss Louisa, if you don't want to see me. She says, I like you, Ormsby. We're going to see each other. Well, I was there for 4 years, and then I got assigned to St. Augustine, Florida, in charge of a battery down there. And I told Miss Louisa that we're going to leave, and she says, well, you're not leaving without me. We're getting married. So we got married. So we were there for a year, and you know what Miss Louisa found? They had bugs and humidity down there. She didn't like it. And I didn't like it either. It was boring. We'd go out and practice a little bit, and that'd be it. So after a year, I resigned my commission, and we moved back to Lebanon, Ohio. And I decided, well, what am I going to do? So I studied the law, and I passed the bar and became a lawyer. Well, I did that for a while, and then I got bored. And then I tried my engineering degree, and I helped build the first railroad from Cincinnati, Ohio to Springfield, Ohio. And then at the same time, this college by the name of Cincinnati contacted me and said, we want you to come and teach here. We want you to be a professor of mathematics and a professor of astronomy because of my love of the stars. And I said, that's great. So I went down and I took the tour, and I said, where's your observatory? They said, we don't have one. I said, well, how are you going to teach about astronomy without observatory? They said, if you want one, go get the money for it. So I did. You know what I did? I went to one of the local churches, and I said, let me borrow your church on a Wednesday night. I want to bring people in. I'm going to charge them 10 cents. And they're going to listen to me talk about the stars and the planets and everything. First night, I had 5 people.
Not going to get wealthy.
No, not going to build a very big. So by the end of a month, I was having over 2,000 people a night. 2,000 people a night. So I was there and stayed there until 1858 when Miss Louisa had a severe stroke, and healthcare in Ohio at that time wasn't very good. So we moved back to Albany, New York, so she could get the care. And 3 years later, she passed away. And this was early in '61. And then in April, we know what happened up at Fort Sumter. And guess who got drafted back into the Army again? But they made me a 1-star. So I was good, and I was put in charge of all the volunteers in Ohio. And they said, you go on down to get your troops together. I got 30,000 men. We want you to go down to Nashville because it's the hub of one of the hubs of the trainings down there. And that's how the Confederacy is supplying their troops. So I got my men, and we marched down there, and 2 days later, we owned it. We had Nashville. And it had just been after harvesting season, and the warehouses were full of cotton. They didn't burn them.
I've heard that your tactical genius at the Battle of Nashville was one of the reasons that you were later transferred to a White House position in strategic planning. Is that
That
right?
is true.
Okay.
That is true. Yeah. So, you know,
What after Nashville?
I went someplace in Alabama, didn't I?
Yeah.
I did. I went someplace in Alabama, and what was that town again? I forget. I'm old. I can't remember this thing.
Best defenses of any city in the South, say Richmond, Virginia.
Yeah.
Huntsville,
Huntsville, that's it. My friend here tells me Huntsville. We took that town without a shot. Not one shot was found. And then after that, I was playing in Chattanooga. I was planning things for New Orleans. You know, we're going to get down. And then they shipped me back to.
Yeah, I mean, it was almost immediately after the brilliant strategy that you devised for capturing the city of Chattanooga,
Yeah.
when that failed a little bit, the great locomotive chase.
Oh, don't remind me of that. It was a great plan.
It was.
We were going to steal a locomotive in the heart of Dixie. We were going to run it up the rail. We were going to burn all the trusses, cut down the things. It was a great plan, except one guy. He forgot to cut the telegraph wire. As soon as we left and had that, we were going, they knew we were coming. We got 80 miles up the road, and they stopped us and hung every one of those guys. But it was a great plan. It was a great plan. It failed, but it was still a great plan.
Well, I think that was recognized in your transfer into that position in Washington, but
It was.
what happened with that?
Leaving in Washington?
No, I mean, the job in Washington that you were assigned to, the planning job.
The planning job that helped the other commanders plan their invasions of areas around the Confederacy that they were trying to get themselves into. And then I ended up down here, and it was interesting. Remember my love of astronomy?
Certainly did.
You know what my men used to call me? They called me Old Stars. And it was a very affectionate term because of my love of the stars and the planets. And then I got assigned down here, and here I am. Now, I heard something about you.
Well, I don't know. You probably have heard a lot of things.
Well, I want to know your background because if we're going to be working together, I need to know where you came from. But I also heard that you have been nominated for the Medal of Honor.
That's correct.
For your work at Harper's Ferry.
That is correct.
That must have been one hell of a battle.
Yeah, I got to Harper's Ferry by a fairly twisted path. It was a hell of a battle, and the defenses were interesting at Harper's Ferry. They were complete in some parts of the wall and not complete in others. So we had to shift men around very quickly, and I had to be fairly present to order the shifts when they were going to happen. So I was judged to be very gallant and very brave by the fact that I was exposing myself to fire. So I was nominated for the Medal of Honor for that. But, where I started out, I was started at West Point as well. I was born in Massachusetts. I thought I was probably going to be a transcendentalist minister. My parents were both Unitarian ministers. And I attended Deerfield Academy, did very well there. And before I graduated from Deerfield, my father attempted to get me a position at the Brooks School. And the Brooks School was a leading transcendentalist development center of the future geniuses that were going to carry the world forward. And I was rejected. My brother Will was admitted later, but I was rejected. And following that, I was working on the farm, and I decided that it was time to move on with my life. I had always been interested in the military, so I, applied for an appointment to West Point, was given one, attended West Point, did fairly well in my ranking in the class, and was appointed as an artillery officer following West Point graduation. Was sent down to the Seminole Wars in Florida, so that's a common thing we have in our background. Fortunately, I did not have a wife at the time, and I know she would have probably reacted the same way. And after the Seminole Wars in Florida, I actually was transferred to General McClellan's staff in West Virginia. And we had some interesting operations going on out there before McClellan had me transferred out to a survey party that was mapping the route of the Transcontinental Railroad in advance of its being built. And we mapped the route that went over the Bitterroot Mountains into Bitterroot Valley. And that was quite an experience as well. And I was brought back from that to Washington to serve under the pleasure of General Edwin Stanton. And did that for about 18 months, and then became the chief quartermaster in the Western Theater with General Nathaniel Lyons in Missouri. And I was a good quartermaster. I was great at organizing things. But what ended up happening was I was assigned to lead a cavalry battalion. And we ended up helping to disperse the disloyal Missouri Guard. And after that, I guess they recognized that I might have some capability in commanding units in combat. And went back, was serving again under Stanton at his pleasure, special assignment, when Stonewall Jackson decided he was going to march his army up through the Shenandoah Valley. And they pulled me out of Washington and sent me to Harper's Ferry, and that's why I was there at that time. My closeness to members of Lincoln's cabinet was probably one of the reasons they sent me down here. And the way that occurred was in about February of 1862. The problems in Hilton Head were being recognized in Washington, D.C. They were very concerned about the solution of the problems, and they sent a man down from Massachusetts named Edward Lilly Pierce, and he was assigned to study the situation, come back and make some recommendations to the cabinet. Pierce came down, spent about 2 months here, reported back to Lincoln that it was a very dangerous situation. The former slaves were living in squalor. The soldiers, the troops, were resentful of them because supplies that would normally have gone to the troops went to these contrabands, as they called them then at that point. And he knew that something drastic needed to be done, and actually Stanton offered the job to Pierce to come down and be head of the efforts to educate them and skill them up for lives in freedom. He turned it down, and I was the next one, I guess, in line. And I was given the job. I was called the military governor of the Department of the South. My rank was the same as, and my authority was equal to, that of the commander of the Department of South. The only instance where his authority exceeded mine was in the use of resources for offensive military operations. I had the same authority to command resources for other things, but when it came to things that needed to be used for military expeditions into the Confederate interior, I lost out on the authority side. And ever since then, I've been down here working with the freedmen. We have started a number of initiatives here that are related to education, skill training, and those have now collectively started to be referred to as the Port Royal experiment. The way we view it, it's an experiment to see, can the formerly enslaved people really work without supervision? Are they able to learn to read and write? Can they self-sustain economically in freedom? And all of these are legitimate questions for now, because we still don't know.
And I think that's where we've got to come up with a plan on what we're going to do to help that contraband. Because
I've seen
with my being here just a few days, going to the fort, seeing the contraband, living in that squalor, living on top of each other, seeing that resentment that's being directed towards them from the troops, because as you said, a lot of things are not being shared. And that's where we are, I think.
Well, I know you've been down here for about 10 days. I know you came in the middle of September, and then 2 days later you were sworn in as a commander. And then I know you were over in the Beaufort area visiting the Army encampments
Right.
in the rest of the Port Royal Islands. And what did you find?
Well, just like I said, I think something needs to be done. I think there needs to be separation between our soldiers and those slaves that are living here. You know, when the invasion took place, in 4.5 hours the Confederacy left, all the plantation owners left too. And they left all their slaves here.
Yeah,
And they threatened them. They said, you do not become friendly with those Union armies, because when we win and we come back, if you have, we're gonna take care of you. So they scared the heck out of them to not trust us.
I mean, the rumor was, I've dealt with them now for several months, and I've heard many times how much they fear that the Union Army is really here just to recapture them and sell them into slavery for economic profit.
They're afraid that a invasion of the Confederacy is going to come back onto the island and take them.
And every one of those slaveholders that left here, you know, just abandoning basically their plantations and their slaves, expected that the Confederate Army would recapture the territory within a matter of days.
Yeah. Well,
And Robert E. Lee has apparently changed his mind about that strategy and abandoned all of the Confederate fortifications on the Sea Islands.
you know. So, you know, I've talked to a lot of people, I've done a lot of touring, talked to a lot of the contraband, and we need to separate this group and make them feel independent. And I was down on the watchtower over here on the marsh, and I saw
the old Pope House.
yes, and up there, and I looked over the marsh, and there's got to be 600-700 acres over there that are just old cotton field right now.
Just to the north of Fishhawk Creek.
Yes, just.
No, there's more than that. That's the former Confederate.
Well, that's all I can see with these old eyes here, you know.
The former Confederate commander married Emma Pope,
Yeah.
and she owned all of Fishhawk Plantation, which was about 1,600 acres at the time.
Yeah.
It was partially cleared, with about 800 acres being left for hunting preserve.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are probably about 800 cleared acres in the area just on the north of Fishhawk Creek.
Well, why couldn't we take those former slaves and put them over there and build them a house, give them a plot of land, and educate them about a lot of things such that they have some independence? Now, one of the things that I hear from them is they don't want to be away from the fort.
Yeah.
Because they're afraid the Confederacy is going to come back and take them. And if that would happen while they're over there, it's going to take a half an hour of marching to get the troops over there, unless we can figure something out to get across that march.
I mean, in trying to persuade them to take the risk of moving away from the walls of the fort, you'll have to be able to convince them that they are going to be close enough to be protected if in fact there is a Confederate attack, and that they will be benefiting from being separate for certain reasons.
Right.
And I mean, what I have found is that every one of the formerly enslaved people that has come through our welcoming or screening process into the Port Royal area, they all seem to be, they're very eager to learn, very willing to learn. I found them to be quite intelligent. Not educated at all, but quite intelligent.
Oh, I have found the exact same thing. I mean, if you think about it, they've been told for their whole life what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. They had no say in anything. Right. And I have found the same exact thing. They're very intelligent, willing to learn, and very invested in their community.
And the fear, obviously, the fear of separation from the fort, the fear of living in independence when that's all they've known all their lives, is something that you'll have to overcome. You know, I found that they're extremely church-oriented. They're very religious people and certainly God-fearing. And, you know, the informal leaders of the Black communities seem to be those people who are in the pastor's role or the minister's role. And on Hilton Head, I've heard about a man who is a former slave from the Savannah area who escaped to Hilton Head shortly after the battle. He had been educated by the overseer on his plantation, which was very unusual at the time. And he came in with his literacy, with his command of the Bible, and with his inspirational ways, and was instantly appointed to be the pastor of what became the first African Baptist church, I believe. Yeah. And I know they've started services.
I hear they're having services underneath the trees.
Underneath the trees.
Well, you know, I think one of the things that we can do is build a church. You know, there's a few trees on this island, you know, and we've got sawmills that we brought down with us. Why can't we saw up some wood and build a church and show a token of good faith to this community?
I mean, you're the commander. There's no reason.
Well, I want some feedback from you, because if you think it's a dumb idea, you know.
Not at all. I think, I mean, that would be a powerful motivator for Reverend Murchison.
Yeah.
To have an actual church in which to worship.
And I think if we could do that and then talk to him about compulsory education, you know, kids under 16 have to go to school. They have to learn that if we give them a plot of land, if we give them land where they can raise vegetables and cows and chickens,
and they can actually have a deed to the land if you
yes.
can do that.
Oh, yes.
Because if you can do that, then that surmounts one of the great obstacles to having essentially a suffrage, the ability to vote, the ability to be a full citizen is dependent upon land ownership.
And I've kind of laid out in my head, because the engineer in me, you know how engineers are. Very straight
You were
line.
an artillery commander too.
Well, I'm a lawyer too. I did a lot of stuff. But, you know, nice clean cut roads, nice corners, you know, and I was looking at this and I was watching some of these former slaves. They have great skills, great building skills. Why couldn't I take groups of men and build houses? I figure if we did it right, and this is nothing big, just a one-room home, but we could build 5 to 6 houses a day. You know, one works on the foundation, one works on the sidewall, one group works on the roof. I think 5 to 6 houses a day is doable with good-sized groups.
I know that the largest segment of the formerly enslaved population in this area are either manual laborers or are carpenters and craftsmen. Yeah. Like you say, they have a lot of skill in building. So I think that would be a wonderful way to include them in their developing their own state of freedom, and also be motivating for those people who have those skills.
And you know what else I think we need to do?
What's that?
I think we need to pay them.
That's been a thorn in the side down here for a long time.
Well, I think we need to take that thorn out. If people are going to work, they give them a fair wage for what they're doing.
I know that this is the same as in Beaufort because it's a department-wide policy, but they are being paid $12 a month, and the rent that they pay to live in one of the facilities provided by the union is $12 a month, and that doesn't
work, does it?
No.
So I think if we can give everyone a plot of land, give them that title to that land, teach them how to use the money that they're going to earn, give them education. I think there's a lot of possibilities that I see growth down the road here for this group.
Ormsby, I think that sounds like a very plausible idea. I think it's going to have challenges, but you know, I think the things that you mentioned and we've talked about probably give you an edge up in mastering those challenges. And I know that it would be an opportunity to add to the Port Royal experiment
And those boys in Washington love the word experiment, don't they?
They love the word experiment.
That's
And I
right.
mean, right now, you know, I know that the president is looking for evidence that will give him sound confidence in issuing the proclamation that he's been working on now for several months. And knowing his interest in the Port Royal area and the symbolic significance it has, I would imagine that he would be interested in that kind of an experiment as well. But I mean, what about financing? I mean, how?
Well, I know you know Chase a lot better than I do. In fact, I've never met the man, but we've got Stanton,
Yeah.
Secretary Stanton, and I know he's in the same mindset as the president.
I know that Stanton has been supplying resources
Right.
here for military operations without reservation.
Right.
And I think Chase has been doing some of that for the first stages of the experiment.
Right, and I think, you know, we could write up the details of this plan that we're talking about here, and we could send it up to Washington, and you know how Washington works, might take 2 or 3 years before they make a decision. You know, but I think we have two allies in Stanton and Chase, and I know the president would be totally behind this concept because he wants to see this group of people grow and develop and be educated and be independent.
How do you plan to go about getting the authority and the funding?
Well, I think Chase is going to be paramount in getting the money from the Secretary of the Treasury.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and as such, he's responsible for the contraband
Right.
as well. And
But you know, I got 5 sawmills here. I got tons of trees. I can call anything needs to be for the defense of the island here.
nothing's so much laid out on earth as a
You know.
general on a battlefield.
That's right. You know, and this is a battlefield. We got to prepare ourselves. We got to have houses. We got to have all these different things. But I think I need to send a letter to both Stanton and Chase, tell them exactly what we're going to do, and with the assumption, unless I hear back from you, we're moving ahead. But I think what we need to do is we need to move ahead now, not wait for that reply from them, because I know they're bogged down in the war effort right now.
It's always a risky strategy, but usually a very productive one, and that's, you know, asking for forgiveness rather than permission.
Right.
That can work. Well, I can certainly.
Just like at home, you ask for forgiveness.
Yeah, rarely permission and often forgiveness. I can certainly help with that. I mean, if you would like, I know Chase intimately through the work that I've been doing for him down here.
I think that'd be
Might
great.
expedite
Yeah, I think that, and a letter to Stanton from you on behalf supporting this plan. Also, I need help with the introduction to the Reverend
I will be happy to make
Mattheson,
those.
so we can do that.
Sure.
Because I think it's gonna be a long thing for us to develop this. It's not gonna happen overnight. I think there's gonna be a lot of pushback from a lot of people that don't wanna see these former slaves being educated, being taught how to.
You and I are among the only senior officer abolitionists in the federal army.
Yeah.
There are not a lot of us.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons we are here is because we have that orientation.
Yeah, I think
There's lots of opposition. The guy who was your predecessor, the interim commander that was here after Hunter was relieved, he was here for a month. John Brannon, who was the commander of the district in Florida before that, he comes up here as interim commander of the Department of the South. And he was
be nice now.
he was a thorn in my side. He opposed me in every possible way when I sought to get supplies for the new recruits to the black regiments that had been authorized in August. They were just authorized when you were getting ready to come down here. He's fought every step to do anything that is anti-slavery and pro-slave. So it is going to entail some opposition.
But I think we can do this.
I'm sure.
I think we
I'm
should
sure.
move ahead. I think these
As long as
people
you and I are in a
deserve.
position here, I
Yeah.
certainly can.
Oh, did you hear that?
No.
Did you hear
Oh
that?
my gosh.
It's the whistle.
Yeah, if I miss that steamer.
Yeah, you gotta spend the night here, and you don't wanna spend the night with all these fudge and tea here, because I know Buford doesn't have any of those.
There's that hotel down there that's supposed to be the finest hotel outside of Atlanta and New Orleans in the entire South.
Yeah.
But it serves as a brothel and a tavern. I don't get caught down there for the night. My wife, I don't have my wife, but she will not forgive me. I'd have to ask for a lot of
But I
forgiveness.
thank you coming over on the boat, spending time with me today.
Ormsby,
And I think we've got a plan here that we can move forward with.
I indeed do. Thank you. Thank you. So a little bit of an epilogue. I don't know if this is picking it up down here. A little bit of an epilogue. So the meeting occurs right about the 25th of September. And following the meeting, General Mitchell will begin to develop his plans for the village. He actually prepares a plat of the village with neatly designed parallel perpendicular street system, with lots demarcated, with places for a church, a school, general store, some of the other things that would need to be built for them to have their own village and town. He'll socialize those views, and they are quickly adopted by his staff. They're happy to have anything that's going to take the slaves further away from the fort. So that's something they'll hop on board with very quickly. His biggest challenge is persuading the contraband community that it'll be a positive for them to move away from the fort. And he does that through his relationship with Abraham Murchison that develops in his promise to Murchison that he will build him a fort. About 2 days after the meeting, he'll give the orders to the sawmills to start preparing the lumber for the houses of Mitchell, what becomes Mitchellville. Won't be called Mitchellville initially. And then he'll go on to write a letter to Secretary Chase on the 13th of October, which was the day after he was invited by Murchison to address the congregation at the First African Baptist Church. And when he addressed them that day on the 12th of October, he told them that a new day is coming, a new light is dawning. You have an opportunity to prove to the people of this nation and the world that formerly enslaved people are able to sustain self-sufficiently and independence. And they will take up the inspiration that comes in Mitchell's speech. They'll get on board quickly supporting the idea of a separate village where they have home ownership, land ownership, where they'll have compulsory, they'll have laws, they'll have their own town government. Those are all things that appeal very much to them. And Mitchell will also start writing up all of his recommendations for rules and regulations to maintain order and discipline in the town, for the compulsory education of children aged 6 to 15, and the design of a town government, a city council, a mayor, marshal, that type of thing. And Marshall, by the way, is a great friend of his from Savannah named March Haynes. March Haynes was this raconteur adventurer kind of a guy who volunteers not only to be a commando and an operative behind the lines, but he'll also volunteer to be the first one into enemy territory when they need someone to gather information. He'll become the Marshal of Mitchellville. Mitchellville will go on to become fully self-governing. They actually will hold elections.
All right, tell them what happened to me, though.
Well, wait a minute, I'm going to do that.
Well, you were going to be here all night if we'd be busy.
Well, so what will happen after General Mitchell writes those letters, he will see that there's a superintendent of construction appointed for the houses in Mitchellville. Those houses will begin construction at about the 20th of October. By the 27th of October, General Mitchell starts feeling ill. He'll get taken to the officers' hospital in Beaufort. And 3 days later, on October 30th, 45 days after he arrived on Hilton Head, he'll die of yellow fever. Oh, no. And his sons are his aides. They're also sick at the time. They will live through their bouts of yellow fever, but they are sick when he dies. And he is died and interred the next day. When they recover, they'll go looking for their father. Say, where is my father? I say, well, he died. And where is he? You say, well, he's buried in the cemetery in Beaufort. And they go, no. We need to have him buried next to our mother because he would want to be by her for the rest of eternity. So he's disinterred, shipped up to Brooklyn, New York to I forget the name of the cemetery, but it was the...
I don't know, I'm dead.
What?
I'm dead.
Okay, anyway, so that's what happens with General Mitchell, and Mitchellville goes on, as you know, and end of 1862. I do that a lot. There will be approximately 200 homes in Mitchellville. By the end of 1863, 350. By the end of 1864, about 450 homes, with 3,500 people living in it. And if you think of the size of a town for that period in history, the beginning of the Civil War, that was a city.
Yeah.
Gettysburg, Pennsylvania was only 2,500 when the two armies converged there. So that's the end of the story. And then Mitchellville after the war, it's sustained for 3 years while there's still troops here who are martial law forces. When those troops are redeployed to the 3 states, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, there are no more federal troops on the island. The jobs in the encampment end. They can't really sustain themselves very well by family on those small plots of land, quarter-acre plots. So they'll form kinship groups, and those kinship groups will pool their resources. And with the pooled resources, they'll purchase confiscated land in other parts of that island, where they will move their homes and establish new compounds and communities. And those 8 kinship groups are the basis of what we know today as our historic Bella neighborhoods on Hilltown. So that ties the past to the present, and that's the whole story.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you all. Sure, we'd be happy to take questions. If
Have
anybody
any
has.
questions? Anybody have any questions? Here's a question.
What
Well,
about the deeds to the property? What's the city doing?
So the deeds now, the heirs properties?
Because they have mobile homes that can be repossessed as opposed to building a home, because they don't have title to the land.
Well, they have title. A lot of the descendants of the Mitchellville freedmen have titles to the land, given them by the federal government after they purchased. But the way that the titles were constructed, they were equal distribution to all of the dependents of the deceased following their death. And now, when the diaspora occurred westward after the war, they moved to the 4 corners of the country and trying to find all of those heirs now to get their signatures for clear title. But there are 3 groups that were just formed recently in the last 3 or 4 years who are doing pro bono work with the Gullah communities to try to help them get clear title. Heritage Library is actually sponsoring a study that does the genealogy for the heirs property groups.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Jim?
Thank you very much, General. I have a question for General Mitchell. I've always been fascinated. We've lived here for many years, and last week and this week, with the heat indexes, the temperature and the humidity, what was it like for your forces to be in wool uniform?
You mean like this one? Yeah, it was. It was absolutely devastating. And what they used to do over at Fort Mitchell, which is in building plantation, they had a armory built into the ground, and they would let the soldiers go in and take their tunics off and go down in there, and it was cool because it was below ground level. And it was one of the few times that they could do that. But they would let them go down to the beach, they would let them take off their tops, just because it was so hot and so humid here at the time,
If I may.
Yes.
When you see the movie Glory, and you see the uniforms of the Northern forces from the Boston Brigade, how in God's name did they make it down here? Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all coming. You have a big hand of applause here. You did a great job. We'll all see you in August. Bill Walston will be our speaker. Bill Walston will be our speaker. 2nd Monday in August. Thank you. Have a good night.